Part 1. Ave Maria. Chapter 1. If all roads lead to Rome, in this story, my road began in Krakow, the place that eventually led me to Pope John Paul II. In 1987, I was in the middle of a series of guest conducting engagements in San Francisco, Philadelphia, and Hamburg, among other cities. For one of these musical weeks, I was scheduled to go and conduct in Krakow. I had heard the Krakow Philharmonic and Symphony Hall in Boston on their 1986 American tour, and my grandparents on my father's side had come to America from Poland. Generations of Levines had lived their lives in Warsaw. I thought it might be interesting both musically and from a family heritage point of view, so I went. But I went with great trepidation. My wife Vera was born and raised in Bratislava, in what was then the Czechoslovak Socialist Republic. The city she grew up in lay just 60 kilometers from Vienna, one of the great musical capitals of the world, but it was surrounded by a barbed wire fence and an expanse of no man's land, which placed it 1,000,000 miles away, well behind the Iron Curtain. Vera knew the hardships of the Socialist East Bloc all too well. She knew what I could expect on my short, week-long sojourn in Communist Poland. I also knew a bit about it. In 1986, I had spent a week conducting the famed Dresden Staatskapelle, at that time living and performing in the Saxon capital, now located very deep in East Germany, one of the Soviet system's worst police state outposts. I had loved the music-making. Who would not? The Staatskapelle is one of the marvels of the musical world, with a unique tradition dating back to its founding in 1548, and a renowned way of making music. They were an ensemble that had survived the 30 Years' War and both World Wars, and now they would outlive, they were sure, the communist commissars. Their music would conquer all. But my week in Dresden had tested me greatly. The Staatskapelle might have been able to steel itself institutionally, but I was alone against the socialist system. The walls and everything else seemed to have ears. I was followed and harassed by the dreaded Stasi, the East German secret police, even though I was supposedly an honored guest of the German Democratic Republic. I was glad to leave with my body intact, but thankfully my soul was artistically refreshed. So I felt a tug in two directions when I went to Krakow. I was anxious about the communist government and what came with it, but at the same time curious and full of anticipation, both as an artist and from the point of view of my family's heritage. My first journey to Krakow took place in February 1987, but even my stay in socialist Dresden did not prepare me for my initial impressions in the Polish city. It was incredibly gray. A pall of industrial pollution pervaded everything, blowing in from the east from the belching furnaces of the workers' paradise town of Nowa Huta, and from the west from the heavy industries in Katowice. The buses had no anti-pollution devices and spewed a heavy foulness that trailed along after them for 50 yards or more. They seemed to be running on belching smoke. The nights were even worse than the days. Everyone, it seemed, used soft coal or peat for heating, which added soot to the day's accumulation of factory-generated filth. It was no wonder that everyone seemed to have a chronic upper respiratory infection. Then there was the secret police, a central part of the totalitarian communist system. Their aim was total control of everyone's life, even the lives of visitors from the West. The secret police kept a close eye on the local population and a special eye on artistic guests like me. For them, control was everything. When I arrived at Warsaw Airport, I was transferred to an airport hotel. I knew I wasn't supposed to be staying overnight, so I thought that was a bit odd. I was, in fact, per my itinerary, meant to have transferred to another flight on to Krakow. But all of a sudden, without a word of explanation, I was driven to downtown Warsaw and put alone on the next train to Krakow. I didn't speak a word of Polish, and in those days few Poles would have wanted to be seen talking with a stranger so obviously from the West. In any case, I was not given a choice in any of this. I was an honored musical visitor to the People's Republic of Poland, but if this is what it meant to be their honored guest, I wondered if everyone would have been treated in such an arbitrary manner. The secret police and the communist authorities